Hey, it's the artist formerly known as Belindaman Evans here, and I am here to discuss the 60-second regular episode of Oddity Archive, and that would be Archive Ware's Rejuvenique facial system, or some title very close to that. Anyway, let's start with that. Archive Wares. I'm sure I probably managed to convince a few people that it was just some one off gag for the Halloween special, but it wasn't intended to be that way. I really am, as of my recording this commentary, I'm still intending to do another round of this at some point. But one thing that I did not foresee when I came up with this idea was that this stuff isn't really the easiest to come by. And even then, the Rejuvenique wasn't really the easiest thing to come by, but I'll get to that. So I guess I'll make that my main opening statement here. Yeah, I haven't ruled out a second installment of Archive Wares yet. All right, now moving on. So the year I made this, 2014, I had been kind of spinning my wheels as to what I was gonna do for a Halloween special. The most realistic thing that I could think of prior to this was maybe I'll just do a VHS vault, something a little simpler this year. And I just couldn't find any tapes that were particularly appropriate for the date. And I had a couple of ideas in mind subject-wise, but it was just an issue of finding tapes for it. And even then, I usually prefer just fishing my stuff out of the thrift store bins. I think that it's certainly a more cost-effective way of making archive. But anyway, I had been working on a laser karaoke episode, I think. I think it might have already come out. But I was taking a night off. The Found Footage Festival guys were coming through town, and I went to see them, and I met them after the show, and I just wound up hanging around, and they, gave autographs and everything. But after that, the two of them and me and a friend of theirs from Wisconsin, where they were originally from, all congregated at a bar tied into this theater, the Alamo Draft House, and there really wasn't much of any shop talk. We were just sitting there chatting. I know they were really tired, and they were, I think it was their last show, and they were heading back to New York the next morning, but there wasn't really, as I recall, a whole lot of discussion about found footage or archive or anything. We discussed it a little. But somewhere in there, just very, very briefly, the Rejuvenique came up. And I don't remember what the context was or why. And I didn't think a thing of it. But, a few days later, I was back working at Archive, and I was just going, I need a Halloween special. I'm not finding any tapes here. And then I remembered the Rejuvenique, and I thought, well, it's been done, but maybe I can add something to this. So now the name of the game became finding one of these stupid things. And my copy came off of eBay, and I paid way too much for it. I think I paid $40 or something like that. And the Rejuvenique is just its own beast in every conceivable way. So I guess I'll discuss that. The whole Rejuvenique thing, using it, was the spawn of Archive Wares, this new concept, because, it came with a videotape. And so there we go. There's the AV component to it. That's what's going to make it work in Archive Land. And of course, they were advertising these things on TV. So you had all the media tie-ins that I usually like having for Archive. But anyway, what seemed like after forever, I finally got the mask. And part of me was kind of scared because I'd seen other people's videos on it, and I knew that people were already kind of doing the horror component, that it made sort of this, I don't know, maybe you want to call it an uncanny valley sort of thing, where it's humanly inhuman or something, or it makes you look like an alien if you want to go in the other direction. Probably more accurately, the alien thing. And so I didn't want to go that way, but I had this mask, and I had seen other people's stuff, and I was just kind of trying to think of a new twist to put on it. But I picked it up, and I figured, well, I spent all this money on this thing. I might as well try it. But I don't know if I really trust this thing, because like when I first got the mask, one of the pins was blackened, and I did a Ben's junk on this, and you can see it there, and you can see it kind of sort of in this episode. You can't see it too well because of lighting issues and focus issues. Everything in the name of efficiency. But my concept, I'm making this sound way too big. The idea was, okay, I don't know if I really trust this thing, so here's the easiest thing to do. I will just lay it down on the chair next to me or something. I was on my sofa, and I figured I'll just test it with the back of my hand. So if something goes wrong, I'm not going to be struggling to get this stupid thing off. I can just lift my hand up. And so that's how I tested it. I put some of the gel on the electrodes, and I put my hand on the inside of the mask, and I had it there, and I didn't really feel anything. At the low setting, it just really doesn't do much of anything. So I turned it up just a little, and it started to vibrate a little, in specific areas, and I turned it up just a touch more. This couldn't have been more than, I think, 4 or 5 out of 10. But then all of a sudden, this just jolt came through a very specific part of the mask, and I lifted my hand up reflexively, and I looked up, and I could feel that I had been burned, but the scar, it did scar, and it didn't turn up for probably till sometime the next day. But it kind of threw a wrench in things, because I realized that I am not going to use this on my face. This is just too dangerous. I don't know if there's just something wrong with my mask, or if this is something that's a normal thing with these. But I'm not taking the chance, and so I had to retool the idea into trying to use it in the episode, so to speak, but trying to keep it believable. So there you go. There's your big red flag. I was not really genuinely using it in the episode, and now you know why.
Adjustable straps and 26 gold-plated contact points.
Check.
The battery-operated control.
So now another issue that I had, expanding on my previous statement, was how am I going to make this work in the episode without actually using it? And how am I going to make it seem at least a little bit realistic? And so I know I'm kind of way ahead in the actual point in the episode here, but I'll just go ahead and discuss it anyway. Realizing that I was not going to use this thing because I felt it was not safe, I decided that I'm just going to have to try and reconstruct it. So I was playing around with the mask, and I noticed that if I just have it on and I have it cranked up all the way, you can hear this faint ticking. And so what I did was, I had to do it kind of late at night because it's so quiet, but I took one of my microphones and I just recorded a complete 15-minute cycle of the mask, just ticking away and clicking over and shutting off at the end. And then I had to splice a lot of it back into the episode, and even then I did it very subtly, so you'd have to listen probably with headphones in a pretty quiet room, because I didn't want it to seem obvious that I was dubbing in some of this stuff. Now, the beep that it makes when you turn it on was real when I'm holding it up to the microphone. That is real. But the just little ticking, that electrical arcing noise, I guess you could say, that it makes, I had to put that back in
the location display area. This indicates that the...
Anyway, getting back to this episode, conceptually speaking, I was still kind of racking my brain to think, okay, well, there is kind of the horror movie element, and people have already done videos where they've turned it into kind of a horror movie, faceless Michael Myers sort of thing. And I didn't want to go that way because it had been done. So I was just kind of at a loss, and I was just trying to focus on the other parts of the episode. So, like, transferring the video, which was kind of a pain. I'll discuss that in a little bit here. But I was watching the video, and I was just thinking, okay, what's something bad that could happen to me here? It didn't... initially, I was thinking maybe a little more blatant, horror-wise. But also, it had to work from behind the box and everything. And, watching Linda Evans host this tape and the very soft focus, and they were trying to hide that, she's getting a little older. We all are getting a little older. But I figured that, okay, well, there I go. It'll turn me into Linda Evans. How about that? Which created another problem in that, you're not going to believe this, but I don't keep things like blonde wigs lying around. And so I had to go, I wound up going online and having to order a wig, and I part of me it was kicking around the idea of doing full costume, but because of the box, it just doesn't make sense. And indeed, keeping it going in that the mask turns me into Linda Evans is already, completely insane anyway. But I decided that I would just keep it just absurd enough. And so I decided to keep it down to just the wig and the scarf. And I had totally forgotten about my own fashion videos episode, and it wasn't until after I received the scarf in the mail, which was just this cheap, horrible, itchy thing. I think I spent like $2 or $3 for it. It reminded me as I was about to try it on that, oh right, I hate scarves. I can use this. Oh, great. Serendipity. And then it's a good thing I hide behind the box anyway, because this would have definitely been one of the more embarrassing episodes, because I got the wig in the mail, and then I tried it on just to see what I would look like. And if you've ever seen This Is Spinal Tap, I looked like a brown-eyed Michael McKean. I was half tempted to go pick up my guitar and start singing Big Bottom. So I was kind of glad that I'm doubly glad I was hiding behind the box there. This is for this one.
A person can increase the pulsation level in these.
So let's discuss the tape itself for a minute here. And the tape was one of the more difficult transfer jobs. Thankfully, it's only a 10-minute tape. But just, I lucked out. Somewhere down the line, I got a clean pass at the tape. But initially, I was worried I was going to have to Frankenstein the tape together, that I'd have to just settle for clean sections of footage, and I'd have to go back and splice it all together and hope to God nobody would notice. But thankfully, I did get a clean pass. And I'm not lying in the episode and in the Ben's junk on this thing that the tape is stupidly cheap. Super thin plastic. There's no latch holding the top of the cassette cartridge on. You can rewind or fast forward the tape with your fingers. Most tapes you can't do that. And it was just, the only thing it could have been cheaper with is, had it been made of cardboard, and I guess there are cardboard VHS tapes out there. Thankfully, this isn't one of them. And the tape itself, really bad stock. You can see at various points in this VHS vault sort of segment here that it starts jittering, which there wasn't much I could do about it. And indeed, the VCR I use to transfer does automatic tracking, so when it does that, it'll just start flashing the words video calibration on the screen. And obviously, I didn't want that, so for a bit, I was kicking around just using one of my old VCRs just so I could get this thing down. Again, thankfully, I got a clean pass at it. But the tape stock was just horrible. It wasn't worn out or anything, although it was kind of strangely a little wrinkly, but I think that had more to do with storage than anything else, because there was no wear whatsoever to the sleeve. So that tells me that whoever owned it before me, if they watched the tape at all, they only watched it once.
Consider yourself served.
Well, as you saw, the Rejuvenique system...
So since we're getting to that particular point in the episode, I guess we ought to discuss how I made that and what it is like to actually wear the Rejuvenique and all that. Let's just start with that. The Rejuvenique itself. I wanted to keep it somewhat realistic because, I couldn't, obviously, as I've mentioned several times now, couldn't really use it without running the danger of burning myself. And so I still wanted it to be as good as possible. So I opted to use some of the gel for the thing, which I wound up having to use like 3 or 4 times. I think I took 2 passes at all the parts of the video. And so I remember putting it on, and the gel itself kind of, I think it might have been a little thicker initially, certainly if the original VHS is anything to go by. But by the time I got it, probably about 15 years later, it had kind of, I think it had broken down, and it was kind of like almost a baby oil consistency. But so I knew I was going to want it, and I wanted it to be realistic, especially once I, supposedly became Linda Evans and had to try and wipe that goop off, which really did take that long. There's kind of a reason why that little bit of it takes so long. It's because that stuff is just, it is hard to get off. And anyway, I put it on the mask, and I put this stupid thing on my face, and it was just the most awful, gooey, nasty thing, and the gel, even if you weren't talking, it would find a way into your mouth and stuff. So it was not a pleasant experience, and to have to do it 4 times grand total was not fun at all. And as far as the construction of this sequence in and of itself, I knew it was going to be kind of a long episode, and I didn't want it to run any longer than necessary, so I kind of wanted to be able to really look at it up close and do a good job with it, but I just couldn't really make it work time-wise. So I had to settle for just getting up from behind the box and showing the inside of the mask and stuff, which had its own issues, focus and lighting-wise. So basically I had a checklist in my box. It's nice having a box in front of you. I had a checklist that I just kind of would quick glance at and go through and, okay, I need to discuss the tape. I need to discuss the paperwork. I need to get up and show the inside of the mask. I need to do this and this and this and this. And so I hadn't even intended for this to be quite this long. I think this whole sequence comes out to 11 minutes or so. But it was just, that's how long it took. And I knew that I couldn't do too many passes at it because after a while you'd be able to tell that it was becoming more and more scripted, because I would just probably start be running more on autopilot every time. And I wanted to keep it fresh, but the price I had to pay for that was a much longer, slower segment. And, I do kind of catch myself, like, I do sigh a lot. I sigh a lot in real life. If you ever met me, you'd have to get used to that. And so, yeah, it's just, it was what it was. It's kind of a baby oil consistency. Now, the release history of my Halloween episodes has not exactly been a stellar one. The first year, it just bombed. And the second year was the year that I got kicked off of Blip, and it just, I'd like to think it just got lost in the shuffle, and I had to break it down into 2 parts because of YouTube and all that. And so I kind of walked into this one more like twice bitten, thrice shy. And so admittedly, I was a little cynical about its release, but I felt like I had a good idea, and, hell, I was willing to put up, I think... This was one of the bigger budget archive episodes. This was, I think, about $70, maybe $80 by the time all was said and done. By the time I got the mask, the shipping, the wig, the scarf. So it was definitely one of the costlier archive episodes. But, again, it was one of those ones where I just had to settle for being one that I would hopefully be at least a little bit happy with, as opposed to what I think would go over the best. So when it finally came time for the episode to come out, I was feeling pretty cynical about it. It was like, yeah, this is just going to be one of those episodes that's more for me than for the audience. But by this point, Archive had built up a little more of a following, and this was the first time ever that I think I was able to put out a Halloween episode without something going wrong. And indeed, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this. The very first one, back in 2012, when I put that on Blip, come Halloween Day, even though the episode had already been up, their servers went down, and just talk about a terrible day for it. And so, again, I was feeling a little cynical. So I was actually surprised when this became... It's not really one of the Archive's biggest hits by any stretch of the imagination, but it did a lot better than the other Halloween specials up until that point, and that made me feel a little better. And the comments were, I thought, quite amusing. One recurring one I seem to remember getting was, why don't you check your pants? Maybe we can go out for a date before you change back. So, yeah, my fans can be, my viewers. I hate to say fans, because you don't know. Just because they're watching doesn't mean they're, into what you do. But, sometimes it's pretty cool. And that was one of those kind of heartwarming moments for me making this, especially knowing that, again, even with the box, I was going to kind of embarrass myself with this one. There I go, putting on the mask and everything. So, it worked.
God.
So we're getting down to the last few minutes of the episode here, and seemingly as per usual, I don't know if I'm going to have enough to say to fill things out here, but let me round up a few little stray bits here. Once I finally get this stupid test actually started and I'm reading my book, that is a copy of Harold Lloyd's autobiography, An American Comedy. For the life of me, I don't really remember why I picked it out. I'm sure maybe I thought I had some sort of great artsy-fartsy reason for picking it. But in the end, I think maybe it was just a little nod to silent comedy and a nod to just comedy in general, and this being one of my little stabs at it. And the only real statement I seem to remember making was with the end music, and I chanced it and played a bit of a rather obscure record by a guy named Joe Egan, who was one half of the group Steelers Wheel. In all reality, there were only two of them, but that's a different topic. And, of course, Jerry Rafferty was the other member of Steelers Wheel, and they had Stuck in the Middle with You. And anyway, I found one of his solo albums in a thrift store bin, and I picked it out, and it was called Stay As You Are, and I really loved the title track. And so I figured I would just chance it because what I walked away feeling, again, I'm getting a little philosophical here, but I remember as I finished writing the episode thinking, what a waste. Why would anybody want to use the Rejuvenique? There are better ways to go about trying to take care of yourself instead of, one of these senseless, stupid miracle products that's somehow gonna, in the case of the Rejuvenique, it's not gonna make your skin any better. It's just gonna make you look like you sustained hail damage, to borrow from one of my own jokes. And so that song, I had just gotten that record fairly recently, Stay As You Are, and it was still kind of playing in my mind, and I figured, well, it's a good way to end this. This really says everything I feel about this product, because I know I'm not really, because of how far I'm getting into the jokes and stuff, that this says it all. So, there you go. That's really about all I remember. Oh, yeah, and the stinger, where I lean out of the box. Now, that was initially supposed to be part of the bit where I'm putting on the mask and trying to get everything set up, but I just kept forgetting it. But I knew it was a joke I really wanted to do, because even now, I mean, it's weird. Even now, I get these comments all the time saying, show your face, and it's like, why? Where do you go from there? And it's weird because I stopped getting those comments for a long time. Now I'm getting them quite a bit again. So obviously I figured to, I guess, kind of troll everybody, stick my part of my face out, with the box there, and not the box, the mask. Anyway, yeah, that really rounds up everything I have to say about this, and probably a lot more about this episode than you'd ever want to hear anyway. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Oh god, that goop. I think I mentioned it. It really did take that long to take off. But anyway, Ben here from the archive, signing off. I'll see you again soon, and I'm sure I'll lazily bash out another Halloween episode commentary in the future, because they're fun and they're convenient. This is just stupid.